Right, good afternoon everyone. Last lesson we had a look at photosynthesis, the equation for it, and this lesson we're going to talk about factors that affect photosynthesis. We're going to start off just by remembering the equation. So it was carbon dioxide plus water gives you glucose plus oxygen, and we remember that the things that we also need are light, so we need the energy from light, and we need chlorophyll, which is found in plant leaves. So that's the equation that we learned last lesson. What we're going to talk about today is what factors affect photosynthesis. Now, a factor is basically a thing. Okay, so what we're talking about is what things affect photosynthesis, what factors affect photosynthesis, and what we care about is something called the rate of photosynthesis. Now, rate basically means how fast something happens. So we're talking about what things affect how fast photosynthesis happens, or what factors affect the rate of photosynthesis. Okay, so factors that affect the rate, and what did we say rate was? How fast of photosynthesis are, and we're going to talk about them. So factors that affect the rate of photosynthesis. There are three of them and you need to know what they are. So there are three things that affect how fast photosynthesis happens. Okay, now the first one of those things, if we have a look at our equation, obviously the provision of these substances, carbon dioxide and water, determines how fast this can happen. So the first factor is the concentration of carbon dioxide. Okay, so factor number one that affects the rate of photosynthesis is the concentration of carbon dioxide. Okay, so how much carbon dioxide there is affects how fast photosynthesis happens. The next thing that's really important is how strong the light is. So if it's super light day with a high strength of light, then you would have a fast rate of photosynthesis. If it was a dull day, it would be slow. But we don't really want to use the word strength, that's a bit pants. So we're going to use the word intensity. So basically, the second factor that affects the rate of photosynthesis is the intensity, which means strength of the light that we are shining on our plant. Okay, so that's two factors that affect the rate of photosynthesis. And the third one, and this is why plants grow much more in the summer, is the temperature. So the hotter it is, the faster photosynthesis happens, the greater the rate of photosynthesis. So we've got these three factors, and basically biologists like to study stuff, all scientists like to study stuff, and one of the things we like to study is the factors that affect the rate of photosynthesis. So what investigations could we do to work out how these factors affect photosynthesis? Well, let's put ourselves a little sort of subheading. Investigating the rate, and we said rate was how fast of photosynthesis. So how can we investigate the rate of photosynthesis? Well, there's a really handy thing in nature in the form of pondweed. Okay, so if I had a beaker with water in and I got some pondweed, as in I went out to the garden pond and I found that curly whirly weed, it's got a proper posh name anyway, it's called Elodea or Elodea. Hello dear. So Elodea is pondweed. If I get some pondweed and I put it in water, if you look really, really closely, what you'll see is that little bubbles appear and float to the top. Okay, so there's bubbles. Now, let's have a think about what those bubbles might be. They've been produced by the plant. So if they're bubbles in water, they must be a gas. So which gas is this plant producing? Well, it's carrying out photosynthesis. It's producing oxygen gas. Okay, so the bubbles coming out are oxygen. And we can say, right, well, if it's producing lots of bubbles, it's probably photosynthesizing faster. If it's producing less bubbles, it's photosynthesizing slower. And the way we do this, rate we said meant how fast. If we talk about how fast something goes, the car is travelling at 30 miles per hour. The athlete is running at 100 metres per second. That would be very fast. It's always per, and per means divide, a time, okay? So anything to do with rate, if we ever want to work out the rate of something, we need some time involved in that, okay? So when we do this calculation, what we'll do is we'll say the number of bubbles divided by the time we've got this running. So let's say we've got it running for 2 minutes. We're going to count the bubbles for 2 minutes. What we would do is we would say, oh, there are, let's give this an example. Let's do 1 minute, it's a little bit easier. Let's just say there were 40 bubbles produced in 1 minute, 1 minute 60 seconds. So you do this to work out the rate. You do the number of bubbles, 40, in the time, 60 seconds, okay? And that's how you would work out the rate of photosynthesis, okay? And then what you do after you've worked out the rate is you basically have to apply that. So the rule is, like we said just now, the faster, so the higher the rate, faster production of oxygen equals faster rate of photosynthesis. Okay, so make sure you have copied these notes. You might have to that's not so good. Rewind a little bit.